Good afternoon. Today our guest speaker is Andrew Davis. Andrew is the airport director of the Worcester Regional Airport. Mr. Davis joined Massport in 2008 as the airport director after a 26-year career with American Airlines. During his tenure with American, Mr. Davis developed a wealth of aviation management experience at a wide variety of airports, as small as Eagle Vale in Colorado and as large as Chicago's O'Hare Airport. He has held many management positions at many airports throughout the country, including Boston, Providence, and Hartford. As director of the Worcester Airport, Mr. Davis is responsible for the day-to-day operations, as well as developing the airport to its fullest potential. With a modern passenger terminal suitable for both narrow-body and regional jet aircraft, and several hundred acres of developable land, the Worcester Airport is well positioned for supporting aviation growth in the region. I'd like to welcome Andrew Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Westborough Women's Club, for this opportunity to share a few thoughts about my favorite subject, Worcester Regional Airport. I'm just going to step behind here so I have a place to put my paperwork. Keep me honest. What I thought I'd do is I give a lot of these talks around the region. Can you hear me all right? Almost got away with it. I give these talks around the region a lot because what we're trying to do is promote Worcester Regional Airport as a travel option. And I usually start these talks with two questions. One is, who is aware that we have commercial air service at Worcester Regional Airport? That's awesome. Now, in the last 6 years or so, how many of you actually use commercial air service? That's great, but that's why I'm here, because I want to see all these hands raised in the future. I thought I'd give you a brief history of Worcester Regional Airport. The airport has been providing commercial air service since it opened in the early 40s, 1941 it opened. And throughout those decades, throughout the decades, there have been various levels of service. As many as 350,000 passengers used the airport in the late 1980s. And as few as zero commercial aviation during some of the quieter months and years where the economic downturn, security measures that were increased really required airlines to kind of retrench in their fortress operations. And that's where we have the challenge of being 40 miles away from Boston's Logan Airport. So whenever there's a downturn in the economy or external impacts that increased fuel costs and whatnot, generally you see a reduction at these secondary regional airports. But we've actually gotten some traction, and in 2010, Massport took ownership of Worcester Regional Airport. That was a critical time in for Massachusetts when they took transportation reform and consolidated all the transportation entities. And one of the things was, instead of everything falling under Mascot, the aviation part of Massachusetts, namely Massport, was kept separate. And part of the arrangement was that Massport would take ownership of Worcester Regional Airport. And that was very important because at the time, Massport was actually operating the airport on the city of Worcester's behalf since 2000. But from that period between 2000 and 2010, since we didn't own the airport, we couldn't put any money into the airport. And quite honestly, Worcester had more important funds to put towards schools, police cars, and infrastructure, where at that time there wasn't much activity going on at Worcester Regional Airport, so why put money into an airport that wasn't returning the investment of the taxpayers' dollars? Well, Massport since 2010 has invested over $100 million in the airport. And some of the examples are, and quite important, most importantly is $32 million went into a new instrument landing system. How many of you heard the horror stories about the Worcester being in the fog? Yeah. And that was a discouragement for people to fly out of Worcester. Well, at the time, the landing system at the airport had the ability for an airplane to land in 1,800 feet of horizontal visibility. That's about a third of a mile. When you can see a third of a mile down the runway, you can land. And the plane had to break through the clouds 200 feet above the ground. Well, this new system that went into place in 2018 reduced those minimums to being able to see 600 feet down the runway. That's 2 football fields. And the plane had to break out of clouds only 50 feet above the ground. So in other words, it now provides the airlines to be able to land in pea soup fog. I mean,
Today?
like today.
Like today.
Perfect example. And if you were up at the airport, we had pea soup fog. Yep, JetBlue took off this morning, and they'll be back this afternoon. We also invest in a lot of safety and security. We invested a lot of money in our firefighting equipment. Massport facilities, the Seaport, Hanscom, Boston, Worcester, all falls under the jurisdiction of the Massachusetts State Police. So our security force are state troopers. So why are we investing over $100 million into this airport? Well, most importantly is we are considered a reliever airport. And if you've seen what's going on at Boston Logan, when I started over 10 years ago, the end of 2008, Logan flew 26 million people in and out of that airport. This past year, they broke 40 million. And there's an issue about 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack. And quite honestly, there's room for growth at Logan. The airplanes that are flying now are bigger, more seats. So it's not necessarily more planes coming into Boston. There are more seats in and out on the bigger airplanes. But even though the airfield can handle that increase, you still have to get to the airport. You still have to go through Ted Williams Tunnel. You still have to go through the roadways in front. And how many of you have gotten caught in traffic at the Ted Williams Tunnel? So Logan has embarked in a 5-year project to widen those roadways. But that means construction. And when you hear the word construction on roads, so that goes back to Worcester Regional Airport being a reliever. We are trying to promote people to use, particularly in the Metro West, Central Massachusetts region, to take a look at the place that we have at Worcester before you think about going to Logan Airport. And I'll get into that in a little more details. The other reason why we're investing in the airport is for the economic development. In 2014, the FAA did a study on all the airports in Massachusetts, and Worcester Regional Airport contributed over $46 million to the economy. Since 2014, they did it again every 5 years, so they just completed one in 2019. With the addition of the flights that have been added to Worcester since 2014, that economic output has now increased to $96 million. So we're contributing to the economy, and that's an important part for Worcester Regional Airport. And in that time period, we've flown over 850,000 people out of the airport. So the airlines we have, 2013, JetBlue made the first initial introduction with their service to Fort Lauderdale and Orlando. And when we put the instrument landing service upgrade in, they added a third flight to New York's Kennedy Airport. Not long after that, in October of 2018, American added service to Philadelphia. And we just introduced Delta service to Detroit in this past August. So now we have 5 markets by 3 airlines that can connect you throughout, not only just nonstop to those markets I mentioned, but those 5 markets have connecting opportunities. JFK, JetBlue has over 230 flights in and out of Kennedy alone, not to mention they're connecting their partners with other airlines. 70 and 80 flights connecting opportunities out of Fort Lauderdale and Orlando. American in Philadelphia is a huge hub for them when they merged with US Air. Connections throughout the United States and 19 markets in Europe. And Detroit points west. It's a great east-west connecting hub. So you basically have one-stop service right out of Worcester Regional Airport. I don't begrudge anybody from wanting to fly nonstop. Go ahead and deal with the Ted Williams Tunnel and the tolls and the parking fees for Logan if you want to fly nonstop. But if you have to make a connection, why not Worcester? Think about it. We have, one of the biggest challenges we have in Worcester is we're surrounded by airports. Obviously, the mothership, which I affectionately call Logan, to the east, Providence to the south, Hartford Bradley to the west, and Manchester to the north. We're smack in the middle of them, so we know people have a choice in air travel. But the proximity of Worcester has its benefits to get you to be closer to Worcester in this area than any of those other four cities. In fact, what we call our catchment area is about a population of about 1 million people that live closer to Worcester Regional Airport than any of the other airports I mentioned. Those 1 million people flew 3.1 million times last year. Obviously, the vast majority was out of Logan Airport. So what we're trying to do is get the attention of those 1 million people just to take a little look at Worcester. Consider Worcester first, because you may find a very convenient flight, you'll find very convenient fares, you'll find low parking, $7 a day versus a second mortgage at Logan. And just the fact that, you know, if you're saving your brother-in-law the drive into Logan and back to pick you up, that poor guy has to drive 4 times to give somebody a ride that goes out to Logan. I'm sure that friend or relative would much rather drive you out to Worcester. So that's why we're focusing on this area, the Metro West Central Massachusetts, because in that last year, 150,000 people that live in Westborough alone flew out of another airport. It's not going to take much. The airplanes that are flying out of Worcester are between 50 and 100 seats. It's not going to take much to get those planes filled, to encourage those airlines to consider a second flight, more markets, another hub, and encourage other airlines to come. Because I will admit, with 5 flights a day, 3 airlines, that's great, but people want variety. They want to leave either in the morning, afternoon, at night. And 1 flight a day just doesn't cut it, unless it fits your travel needs. So another thing we did was introduce a marketing plan, invested $300,000 just a little under a year ago to do a blitz through TV, radio, newsprint, community advocate we advertise with for the local folks in this area. Social media, billboards, and that's helping us get the word out. The feedback we're getting is, particularly that billboard, that it's my favorite one. It's on the east side of 495 on the Mass Pike, where you're merging on to 495 heading east to Logan. Seeing a sign like, I'm stuck in this traffic, I got to pull it out of Worcester. So hopefully you've heard that. Hopefully you're considering Worcester Regional Airport. I went to a presentation by the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. And what's interesting is 35 to 40% of the people that come to Massachusetts are actually friends and family, coming to visit family. So when I encourage you to take a look at Worcester Regional Airport for flight options, also spread the word to loved ones, clients, customers, partners, and whatnot. Have them take a look at Worcester, because if you're the poor soul that has to go pick that person up, I'm sure you'd prefer going to Worcester to pick that person up for their stay. So I kind of rambled real quick, because my favorite thing to do is answer any kind of question. So I usually miss a few things, and when the question comes up, it reminds me. So why don't I pause and offer the floor for questions? Yes, ma'am.
You used Worcester to go to Florida,
Yep.
you know. But the problem is, and so it's not, you should have more, like, you know, when you get stuck there, or if the flight's coming in late, there's nothing to eat. You know, in
At Worcester?
Yeah, it's really tough.
Well, the one cool thing JetBlue does, they pull out their service card. and they've got all kinds of beverages, but we do have a full concessionaire there, and that person.
But but what if the flight is canceled, like, the Florida flight to Fort Lauderdale? I'm not complaining,
Yeah,
just
no,
saying,
if
that's
you're
why-
going to Fort Lauderdale,
Yeah.
the airlines are also very good at rebooking and accommodating ground transportation to Logan.
Right, I
And
understand.
that happens, that's not floor on Worcester, flights cancel at every airport.
I understand, but because sometimes it's like, oh my God, I'm going to Worcester, I've got to make sure I have food in case we get delayed, and, and things are closed down.
No, our concessionaire will stay
So it's
open
changed
for the
since
entire
last year.
time. Yeah. When was the last time you flew out?
Last fall.
Okay, because La Mirage is a fantastic concessionaire there. They they have meals prepared, so if you want to take it on board, full service bar, friendly staff, and they committed not to leave until the last passenger's
All right,
gone.
good, that's good to know.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I have to confess, I'm a travel advisor.
All right.
I love Worcester Airport. Obviously, unless you're going to make a connection in JFK, you're not going to go to Europe.
Right,
You're going
it's a
to
morning
have to go to
departure.
Boston. But we're really lucky. Like he said, we have 5 airports to choose from. And Worcester's great. Long-term parking, last time I went out of Worcester, was $7 a day. You can't beat that.
$42 a week, you get the 7-day free.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're stuck on an airline that doesn't quite make it into JFK on time, there's a late flight out of JFK to Worcester. Believe me, I know it. The security people there are fantastic. They're really, really nice. It's just a whole different experience. And that's nothing against Boston and Hartford. I've flown out of all of them, but I like Worcester.
I'm going to give you the microphone.
I like Worcester!
You did mention that the morning flight to Kennedy on JetBlue doesn't have those connections internationally, but Philadelphia, 19 connections to Europe on the afternoon flight to Philadelphia. So keep that. Yep, I did it last summer. It was fantastic. Connected to Greece, beautiful connection.
That's always been
So
ours.
thank you for the comments. That's really the moral of the story, the convenience factor of Worcester Regional Airport. I love telling the story. I don't encourage anybody to do this, but once I was standing on the curb about 10 minutes before, I think it was the Fort Lauderdale flight was leaving, and I see this Jeep come screaming up the entrance. Before the Jeep even stops, somebody's jumping out of the passenger seat with his tote bag in one hand, already printed boarding pass in the other, runs through the sliding doors, up the escalators, goes through the security checkpoint. Obviously, at 10 minutes before departure, everybody's through screening already and on board the airplane. Shows his boarding pass to the agent. He's on board he's going down that jet bridge 2 minutes after arriving. Tried doing that at Logan. But therein lies the problem. JetBlue's flights are 100 seats. I would not encourage you to do that because the other 100 people will do the same thing, and then you're taking a delayer, and then you're not getting through security. But yes.
I know you said that the parking is $7 a day if you
Right.
have there for 7. Is it on site or is it something you have to be shuttled to? I've never
Nope,
been to that airport.
we have 2 parking lots. There's one directly across the street from the terminal, 300 feet. There's one next to the terminal that's about 50 paces farther on average, but that's at ground level. The one across the street, you have to go up a flight of stairs, and if you've got 50-pound bags and whatnot, it's easier to park at the main lot.
So and some of it's covered and some of it is not covered?
No, not covered. That's our goal, is to have enough passengers that we're going to need to have a garage across the street.
Right.
But what we do in the wintertime, I don't know how many times I've seen these poor souls get off the Florida flights in their shorts and sandals when there's 6 inches of snow on their cars. We have contractors that do the parking lots to clear the snow, and they beef up the manning when the planes arrive. And they're equipped with shovels and brooms and battery jumpers, compressed air for flat tires. So we're full service.
That's
there.
great. Thank you.
And I'm not a unionized employee, so I can't go out pushing snow. But I'm usually out in the parking lot. Otherwise, I'm sitting behind a desk, I'd be out in the parking lot helping folks get out of their snowdrift. So don't worry about snow in the wintertime. That's the other thing, major investment we made was over $5 million in snow removal equipment. I've got a great, wish I had a picture of it. I've got three vehicles that are called multitask. They've got a 22-foot wide plow in the front, a 24-foot wide sweeper broom, a rotating broom, and a blower that blows air 450 miles an hour out each side and the back. 3 of those going up and down the runway can clear my 7,000-foot runway in less than 15 minutes. So we can't control the weather, but we can control the conditions on the ground. So how many times have you heard folks, we have to circle, they're working on the runways at the busier airports. At Worcester, for taking off, this is going in reverse. How many of you have ever heard the pilot say, we're number 1 for takeoff, and you're still at the gate? I think I saw it.
How would you get from a small airport like Stewart or White Plains to Worcester Airport?
Not easily.
I'm afraid.
Carry limousines is big down in the Westchester
There are no
county.
flights.
Yeah, there's nothing scheduled, nothing direct. So don't go into those airports, just go directly to Worcester.
Do you see in the foreseeable future that JetBlue might have a nonstop going to the western part of Florida, Tampa, Fort Myers?
I was going to plant somebody with that question. Thank you. We would love JetBlue, or any air carrier. JetBlue, they're big in Florida, so they're the obvious ones to think of. I constantly hear, what about the Gulf Coast of Florida? They don't care if it's Fort Myers, Punta Gorda, Tampa, Sarasota, St. Pete. Any one of those, it's a lot better than driving across, either Orlando or driving across. I get a lot of people that fly to Fort Lauderdale that get to Naples. JetBlue's listening. They don't see it in their numbers yet, but I'm kind of subtly suggesting that to both the Worcester Red Sox and to JetBlue, now that the Worcester Red Sox are in Worcester, spring training is in Fort Myers at the JetBlue ballpark. JetBlue's the official airline of the Red Sox. So I've had a number of conversations with the leadership at the Red Sox and JetBlue to say, hey, listen, how about tipping your toe in the water and see what the flights will be like during spring training? And that'll catch on for year-round service.
Thank you.
I have to say something else. When I was doing corporate work, which I don't do anymore, when Providence opened with Southwest going to Chicago, it made a huge difference for the companies that we were sending, the people that we were sending to Chicago. I would love to see a flight to Chicago.
Yeah.
Me too.
But I don't really see it coming because Delta doesn't really do Chicago, that kind of thing. But
However, the data I was telling you about, the 3 million flights that were taken by residents in this area, that data also shows the 2 most popular destinations for people flying in and out of this area. Number 1 is Chicago. Number 2 is the Washington metro area.
Yeah.
So, when we go and meet with airlines, you can tell the airlines that we're talking to because of that data. American and United in Chicago and Southwest for Baltimore at least, and to some extent American into Washington National since they picked up a lot of the U.S. air routes. We provide them with that data. And the biggest concern they have right now is they don't want to, what they call, cannibalize passengers out of Logan. They don't want to fly 2 half-filled airplanes that they're currently able to fill out of Boston.
Yeah.
So until that demand continues to increase at Logan, that's why I'm very, very pleased with the numbers exceeding 40 million people. There are going to be times of the day where they're filling up an airplane, say the 7 a.m. departure to Chicago is filled every single day on American. Those customers that weren't able to book, they're going to go to other airlines unless American puts one at 7:05, and that adds to the congestion of Logan. So we're encouraging those airlines to say, hey, instead of a 7:05, why not a 7 out of Worcester? Keep those customers.
I'm curious, for Washington National, is that just with your data at this point, looking farther away?
What do you mean by farther away?
Just like how soon do you predict or see that service could happen?
There's no airline on the hook per se, but the great thing is that 5-6 years ago, we have a route development director and a manager that goes to conferences they call it speed dating. They'll spend 15 minutes with an airline route director to peddle our wares. And when that poor guy would go to those conferences 5-6 years ago, it was like he had leprosy. Everybody avoided him like the plague because he knew he was going to talk about Worcester. Now they're listening. Now they're asking more questions. And now they're looking at the data very hard because they see how well, particularly the Florida flights are doing on JetBlue. They see now we have 3 major airlines flying out of Worcester. There's something in the water in central Massachusetts. And we're talking about how well the economy's doing, the renaissance that's going on in Worcester. And we were talking earlier about Westborough just exploding with business. The business travelers would much prefer the convenience of an airport like Worcester than having to deal with the traffic alone. I'm sorry? Amazon.
Is there anything that we can do as individuals or communities to communicate interest in any of the destinations?
You know, Worcester, somebody in Worcester started a 10,000 postcard campaign to tell the Pawtucket Red Sox they should move to Worcester. So maybe something to JetBlue with 10,000 postcards. But you know what you do is you call, when you want to make reservations, you call the airlines to say, do you fly out of Worcester to West Palm Beach? Or, more importantly, when you start surfing on Orbitz, Expedia, Travelocity, they track the number of people that are typing in Worcester or ORH. Does anybody know that the airport code is ORH? Why? I have no idea. I have a theory about that. But they collect that data and share it with the airlines. Hey, you've got a lot of inquiries out of Worcester. So check that first. Glad you asked. I have a theory and I have a logic behind it. About close to 60, 70 years ago, Civil Aeronautics Boards started assigning 3-letter codes to airports. Any airport that started with a W, an N, and a K could not be used as the first letter. W's and K's are the first letters of radio transmissions. And radio transmissions were used for navigation aids for the airplanes. So they really didn't want an airplane landing at WBZ Airport at the WBZ radio tower. So you couldn't use W's or K's. N's were reserved for naval air stations. So logically would say that you would go to the next letter. Like Key West is EYW. Norfolk is ORF. So logic would say, okay, why not ORC for Worcester? Perhaps it was already assigned to another airport. But my theory is, so you would go to the next logical letter. And that's where my theory comes in. The poor soul at the CAB probably thought it was looking for the airport code for Worcester. That's right. So that's the only reason why I think we're the
Remember, when Continental first came in many years ago, they misspelled Worcester. And they couldn't pronounce it when you called them.
I have the radio air traffic control tower frequency on in my office. And I would say 40% of the time the pilots call Worcester Tower. There's a great with JetBlue was hinting that they were going to fly out of Worcester. Their vice president of marketing, who's from Hingham, wrote Worcester on a billboard, on a poster board, and walked around his office and asked everybody to pronounce it, and they videotaped it. You can find it on YouTube, and you can get a good laugh out of the guy because they were getting all kinds of different pronunciations. Worcestershire, yes.
I had to learn it. I came from Pennsylvania.
Other questions?
Anybody else have a question?
Go ahead, ask the question about
Well,
the route.
I thank you for your time, and I encourage you to type in ORH, and if you can't remember the letter code, Worcester, on the orbits and Travelocities, and tell your friends, family, co-workers, and clients to think about flying into Worcester, because our goal is to fill those airplanes to prove to these airlines and potential airlines that Worcester is a viable airport. So, thank you for your time.
The election is the 12th.